All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar for today. You are in the Getting Started with Google Sheets webinar. And this is just a basic Google Sheets webinar. It's going to talk a little bit about how to do some functions and how to do some different things within Google Sheets. If you're used to using Excel, this is a really good webinar to attend. If you're looking to make that change into Google Sheets, this is a really good webinar to attend because we're going to talk about a lot of those things, including how to convert your Excel files over to Google Sheets. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. My name is Christy Hughes. I'm going to be your host for this webinar. I am an educational technologist over at NWACA, as well as a Google for Education certified trainer. I've actually been at NWACA now for 13 years. Prior to that, I was an elementary school teacher, and I also have 3 kids of my own that keep me busy while I'm not at work. Just some webinar housekeeping for today. If you've never been in one of our webinars before, everybody should be muted as soon as you got into the webinar, but please don't hesitate to ask any questions. You can feel free to unmute yourself, or there's also a chat box on the side. Feel free to use that. You can just send me a message through the chat, and I will read that if you have any questions. So either one of those is great, but certainly if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. If you'd like to follow along in your own account, in your own browser, go ahead and open up another tab so that you can also, do what you need in Google Sheets, but then also see and hear me from this webinar. So you're able to do both if you want to kind of follow along. Our objective for today is to learn how Google Sheets can be used for productivity in the education setting. So whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you're, another role throughout the education setting, we're going to talk about how you can go ahead and use Google Sheets to add a little bit more functionality to maybe what you already do. I just want to point out a couple of things before we go ahead and jump into Google Sheets. This is a screenshot of our training.nwaca.org website. This is probably where you went to go ahead and get signed up for this webinar. All of our class materials are out there. And so if you look at the top, it does say class materials is that little tab up there. I just want to point this out because if you are looking for any documentation about Google Sheets or about any of the other Google applications, this is a really good place where you can go ahead and go. All of these icons right here do go out to what we call a checklist. And so that checklist has a lot of instructional videos that are on it that you can go ahead and listen to. Now, all these instructional videos are not very long. They're, 1, 2, 3 minutes. So I would encourage you to go ahead and go out there and use any of those resources if you need them. I also just want to mention our Tuesday Tech Tips. If you are not part of our Tuesday Tech Tips, the URL is down there at the bottom. You can feel free to sign up. It is free, and so every Tuesday, we actually send an email to your inbox. And this email describes something technology-related that you can try inside your classroom or outside of your classroom. But sometimes it's Google-related, sometimes it's not, but it's always something to do with technology. So if you're interested in doing that, feel free to sign up with that URL down at the bottom, as well as feel free to share that URL with other people in your district if you're interested in receiving little tidbits from NWACA every Tuesday. And then lastly, I want to talk about our GEG of Northwest Ohio. You probably have noticed this GEG logo here in the corner. GEG stands for Google Educators Group. And so what that means is we're a group of Northwest Ohio, and we get together every so often. We're now almost to the end of April and into May. And so we have a lot of summer events planned with our GEG of Northwest Ohio. And so I do have links here for the GEG website and then also the Roadshow, which I'll talk about here in a second, where we have all these events. You are welcome to attend any of the events. They are all completely free. You can attend, or you can present, or you can do both. And so we're kind of going all over the state. The next one that we have coming up is River Valley, and then after that we have one in Bryan, Ohio. So we have lots of other ones also, so feel free to check out those links. And you can go ahead and sign up to attend or present or do both. Which, by the way, this presentation will be out on our training.nwaca.org website. So if you don't want to jot those URLs down now, you certainly don't have to, because you will be able to access this presentation after this webinar. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with Google Sheets. And so these are the topics that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how you can go ahead and open up Google Sheets if you've never opened it up before. We're going to talk about all the templates that are available inside Google Sheets. You may or may not have realized that there are free templates that you can go ahead and use and just alter as you see fit. We're going to talk about that second one, that big one. If you're a new user of Google Sheets, how you can go ahead and grab your files from Excel and move them or convert them into becoming a Google Sheet. We're going to talk about resizing columns, text wrapping, formatting cells. If you're looking at these things thinking like, oh yeah, I do those things in Excel, I'm going to show you how to do those same things in Google Sheets. And 9 times out of 10, it's pretty similar, but I'm going to talk about all those things, including sorting and filtering, conditional formatting. We will briefly talk about some functions, just the basic ones. We're going to talk about that Explore tool at the bottom of the page, charts, and then lastly, this is always a common question with Google Sheets as well as with Excel, how you can print it. Number one, if you can print everything just on one page, and then number two, how you can print it without the grid lines, or maybe you do want the grid lines. So we're going to talk about all of those things in this webinar today. So we're going to go ahead and hop out of this presentation, and we're going to go into Drive and into Google Sheets so I can show you live how all of these things work. So we're going to say, let's check out Google Sheets and tune in for the Christy Show. Before I do hop out of this presentation, though, very quickly, I just want to quickly go through this presentation and just show you that there are a lot of screenshots through this presentation, as well as just some basic instructions on how to do all the things that were in our topics list. So if this is something, again, later on, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, feel free to go ahead and grab it, because all of these topics are located inside this presentation as well. And at the end of this webinar, I will give you the URL to get this presentation. If you don't want to wait for it to go out to the training.nowaka.org website, you can feel free and jot that URL down at the end of this webinar, and then you will also have a copy of this presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and hop out of this, and I'm going to get into my Google Drive. So I'm inside my Google Drive, and I'm actually in my test user account, and that's Wilma Flintstone. So here she is over in the corner. If you're familiar with Google Drive, or even if you're not familiar with Google Drive, there's a couple different ways you can get there. The first way is just by typing in drive.google.com, or you can also go to your apps launcher here in the corner and just select Google Drive. Either way, you can get to Google Drive. And if you've used any application within Google Drive before, you know that that blue New button is kind of how you open up all of those apps. And so Google Sheets is listed there as one of those apps. So there it is right underneath Docs. One of the nice things about Google Sheets, and this is part of a recent update that Google did, is now each one of these has a little arrow off to the side where it allows me to decide right now, do I want a blank spreadsheet or do I want to create something from a template? So we are, of course, going to use that blank spreadsheet here in a second, because I'm going to be showing you lots of functions and so forth, charts and all those things. But what I do want to talk about briefly before we hop into that blank spreadsheet is this whole idea of templates. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on From Template. And I just want to show you all the things that are available. Now, it's important to know that it does default to whatever your domain is. So I'm at Northwest Ohio Computer Association, or the .info account, and so that's what it defaulted to. So we don't have any shared templates. But if I do click on that general word, this is going to default me to all the templates that are there by default from Google. So I have a purchase order, I have financial statements, I have a timesheet, I have an invoice. Of course, all these things are just templates. So that means that I can go ahead and change any part of this. So for instance, I'm going to just click on this schedule, because this is a probably really popular one. If you know, you're in the education field and you're doing lesson plans, or you're doing your daily schedule for conferences or something like that. So notice how it's just named schedule. Of course, I can just go ahead and double click on this and rename it, but I can also fill in text. So let's say this is Lisa's spot, so I can go ahead and fill in text in any one of these. So that's what's really nice about the schedule. Of course, I can change any of these days and times and so forth because, again, these are all just cells in my Google Sheet. Of course, you know that if you're using anything in Google Drive, this is automatically saving for you in your Google Drive account. So if I hop back over to my Drive, my Google Drive in Wilma's account, I'm going to go ahead and see that word schedule right there that I started today at 3:45. So it's automatically already there. I don't have to click on save. In fact, there's not even a button to save it because it automatically saves. So that's what's really nice about all these Google apps. So I'm just going to talk about that template really quickly, but if you have other questions, feel free to send those my way. But once again, when you're in Drive and you go to that blue New button, you can go ahead and decide if you'd like to open a template or a blank spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of that template, and I'm going to go back to my Drive. And this time, we're actually going to go ahead and open up a blank spreadsheet. Because if you were using Google Sheets, you may be starting from scratch. Of course, you may have something already prepared from Microsoft Excel, which we're also going to talk about. But if you were ready to just start off fresh, you can just go ahead and put in a blank spreadsheet. So if I was putting in that blank spreadsheet, of course, the first thing that I'd like to do is go ahead and give it a name. So I'm just going to name it webinar, and here is my blank spreadsheet right now. Now, what I will say, and this is always a common question between Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel, is people will say, okay, number one, I have an Excel file. How do I get it to Google Sheets? And then also, I have a Google Sheets file. Can I get it into Excel? And so the first thing that I'm really going to talk about is underneath the File button, we have this option where it says Download As. And so I have Microsoft Excel, I have PDF, I have CSV file, I have all these different features. So if you are a person that uses Google but your counterparts don't, you can go ahead and prepare everything in Google Sheets and then push it out to Microsoft Excel, and then they can read it, or vice versa. So that's a really nice feature. With that said, I'm also going to show you the flip side of that, where if I had an Excel file, I can go ahead and bring it into Google Sheets. And there's actually two ways that I can go ahead and do that. And the first way is underneath that File menu again, I have that option to import. So if I click on import, it's going to look on my computer in my Drive or upload just a regular file. Maybe I have a file created on my desktop, or somewhere, maybe it's already in my Google Drive where I can go ahead and upload it and bring it in. Now, that seems pretty easy enough, but there's actually even an easier way to bring in files into Google Drive. And what I'm going to show you is I'm going to go ahead and close out of this webinar, and I'm just going to go back to Google Drive. Now, I'm inside of Google Drive right now, and what I really want to do is I want to take my Excel file that I already have prepared. It's actually saved on my desktop, and I want to move it into Google Drive. And if you remembered, when I was in Google Sheets, I can click on File and then Import and bring it in, but there's an even easier way to do it. In fact, if you have a whole folder full of Excel files, this would be a great way to get all those Excel files over to Google Drive. And so what we're going to do, and I'm just going to move my screen over so I can show you, I have this file right here that says Webinar Sample Spreadsheet 2.xlsx. And so that is an Excel file, and I want to move it to Google Drive. Now, the easiest thing in the world is just to drag it and drop it, and it just drags and drops and puts itself in Google Drive. But before I let it go and let it do its thing, I do want to caution you on one thing. And if you're familiar with Google or Google Docs, if you've done this with Word or PowerPoint or other applications, you may know that there's a little gear over here in the corner. This is our settings. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that gear there really quick, and then I'm going to click on Settings. And right here, here's this magic button right here where it says Convert Uploads. If I check that box, what that means is it says Convert Uploaded Files to Google Docs Editor Format. So what that means, if that box is checked, is it's going to take my Microsoft Excel file and it's going to convert it to a Google Sheets file. Now, the original file will still be on my desktop, so there's still nothing that's going to happen to that. But if I have this box checked, it's going to take Excel and move it to a Google Sheet. Now, again, if you're just getting started with this and you're like, whoa, Christy, I'm not ready to convert anything, that's fine. You can leave this not checked, and when I click on done and I drag it over and drop it, it's going to stay as Excel. So there's not one right or wrong answer to that. If you have lots of Excel files and you like Excel, go ahead and bring them over, but don't convert them and just keep them in Drive, because Drive is your cloud-based storage. Or if you're ready to convert everything, go ahead and check that box under the settings, convert it all, and then now it's a Google Sheet. Whatever works best for you. I just wanted to point out those things because when you're going between applications, those boxes are really important. So in any case, I'm going to go ahead. I have my box under settings unchecked, so it's not checked here, convert uploaded files to Google Docs editor format. So I'm going to click on done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this Excel file and I'm just going to drag it and drop it. And I'm going to drop it. I don't want it to go to a folder, although I could, but I don't want it to. So I'm actually just going to drop it inside my Drive. And notice how now what's happening is it's actually moving it over as an Excel file. So if I double click on this, and you see the difference, this X means it's Excel, whereas this means it's a Google Sheet. So if I double click on this, this is just going to give me a preview because it is a .xls file, it's Excel. It's still going to have the same thing, but it's Excel. I can download it, I can still work on it, I can even open it in Google Sheets if I want to, or I can keep it as Excel, that's fine too. But know that you'll be able to tell the difference. Whereas here's my schedule that I just created. If I double click on that, that opens up automatically in Google Sheets because it is a Google Sheets file. But in any case, now you know how to bring in Excel files and you can decide what you'd like to do. Again, there's not a right or wrong answer with that. I just wanted to explain how that works. And now I'm going to close out of this schedule here. I'm actually going to hop right into this sample spreadsheet that I have prepared for this webinar. And we're going to talk about a lot of different features in Google Sheets. And so first off, in our list of topics, we're going to talk about how to resize columns and do some text wrapping. So first things first, I have this webinar sample spreadsheet, and everything looks great here. It all looks even. But let's say while I was preparing this, and this is a really common thing, this address, the column is too small. So while I was typing in the addresses, now each address, you can see up here on the top, is all the way in there, but you can see that it's cut off. And so lots of times that really bothers people, including me, because I'd like to see the whole entire thing. So I can manually go between E and F if I'd like to, where that line is, and just hold down with my mouse and drag it out. Or what I can do, it's even easier, I can just double click on that line and then it automatically formats it for me. So kind of my rule of thumb with this is that I put all my information in there first, and then when I'm done at the very end, I'll just go back through and double click between each column that maybe is not fitted correctly, and then it will automatically fit itself. That saves me time than, moving this back and forth. The other thing I want to mention too is, let's make this really tiny once again. If I wanted to do some text wrapping, and so I have a lot of different features that I can do with changing my text. And one up here, this is my text rotation. So this is kind of fun. Let's say that I wanted to highlight row 1. And so with this text rotation, maybe I wanted all of the names to be on a slant. So I can go ahead and do that. So basically, whatever I have highlighted, including one cell versus the whole row versus the whole column, I just have to select that first before I go ahead and click on whatever icon I'd like to use. Now, with the text wrapping, so same thing. So text wrapping is right next to that text rotation. And if I click on text wrapping, there's actually a drop-down arrow next to it. So I'm going to click on text wrapping. I can go ahead and choose the overflow, the wrap, or the clip. Now, wrap is pretty, that's a good one, pretty universal. So if I click on wrap, then it just wraps it and just makes the row a little bit bigger. So you have a lot of different options, or like I said before, I could just double click on this and then I get, it goes straight across. Either way will work, just lots of different features that you can go ahead and play with in Google Sheets. So let's talk about some other things up here in our toolbar. We're going to talk about how we can merge cells. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead where it says row 1, I'm going to go ahead and just insert. So I'm going to go to my insert menu and I'm going to say I'm going to insert a row above because I'm going to go ahead and make a title for this webinar sample spreadsheet. And I'm going to type in, this is my parent info. So we'll just say parent info. Now, again, I don't have to have this slant, so I can go ahead and change that back to where it was before. But I'd really like to make this bigger. So, of course, anything I do in Google Docs and Google Slides and everything, I can go ahead and make this as big or as small as I want to, italicize it, change the font, do all these different things. But what would really be good is if it kind of went out into the middle of this spreadsheet, because I don't really want it shoved over here in the corner. So this is where the merge cells comes into play. So if I highlight A1, and I'm going to highlight a couple of these, we'll just highlight them all the way down here, and I'm going to go up here to some more icons. I'm going to look through my toolbar, and right up here, I get this merge cells option. So here's a drop-down menu that will show me merge all or merge horizontally. So I'm just going to say merge all, and what it does then is it basically merges all of those cells together. So now when I click on parent info, I can go ahead and center it, and now it's centered in the middle of my spreadsheet. So it's not really shoved in the corner anymore. So that's really helpful. So lots of these different features are up there, and you can kind of manipulate your text or your data in various ways. So really, really neat. I can also use borders. So again, if I wanted this to stand out a little bit more, I can go ahead and make it have a border. So right next to merge cells is this borders. And so if I click on borders, I get a whole bunch of different ones that I can go ahead and use. And I'm just going to click on this outer borders one to make it really dark. And here's even my border color if I'd like to change that. So I get in my border style, maybe I want to make it really dark. So I can go ahead and do that, and now it stands out even more. So again, you can kind of customize your spreadsheet by using all of these different tools up at the top in your toolbar. All right, so kind of along the same lines, I'm going to make this be flat again so we have a little bit more room. But kind of along these same lines, we're going to talk about formatting our cells. And so in my spreadsheet, I just have some, general data here, first name, last name, email, city, state, zip, library finds, Chromebook repairs, account balance. And if you notice, these three columns right here have dollar bills and cents signs in them. Now, that was not something that I typed in. Rather, it was something that I used as formatting my cells. And so I'm going to run you through how I did that. So library finds right up here, I'm just going to highlight column H, which basically, again, anytime you want to change something in one of your sheets or one of your cells, you have to highlight it first so that Google Sheets knows what to change. So I'm going to highlight column H. And up here in the corner, in the front part of my toolbar, I have my dollar sign, I have my percent sign. So I'm going to click on my dollar sign, and what you're going to find is, again, for column H, I'm going to go ahead and click on my dollar sign. So basically what that did is it formatted column H by having that dollar sign. So now here it is done. So I'll just, just to be silly, I'll go ahead and highlight my zip code since my column H already has a dollar sign. I'll just highlight column G here, and I'll click on my dollar sign here, and it's going to give all of those zip codes a dollar sign. So again, that's just an example so you can see how that went back and forth. Of course, I'm going to undo that, but you get the idea. That's how easy it was. Just highlight the column, click on the dollar sign, and then it goes back. With that said, let's say that maybe I wanted an extra decimal point, or maybe I didn't want that many decimal points. So same thing, I'm going to highlight column H, and I can go ahead and move my decimal place accordingly, or go ahead and move it accordingly the other way. I can do whatever I want to just by highlighting that column. And then here's my percent sign also. I can highlight that column, and then I can go ahead and use all of those different features. So here's some more formats. I'm just going to drop this menu down real quick. I can go ahead and highlight it. Date and time are a real popular one. Lots of people like to format columns by date and time. You can also do accounting, financial, percentage, scientific. So you can really get into more formatting. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how we can easily fill down or create what we call a series. Now, these are kind of fun, and I will mention down at the bottom, I'm still on sheet 1 down here. And so if I wanted to create a new sheet, I can go ahead and just click my plus sign, and that will automatically create sheet 2 for me. So I can go ahead and I can rename these two if I'd like to, just by double clicking on them, or I can move or click on this little arrow right next to it, and I can go ahead and click on rename. I can also color code them if I'd like to, so I can even add like a color down here just to make them stand out a little bit more. But regardless of the number of sheets that I have down here, this still is considered my webinar sample spreadsheet. So that's really important to know too, that I can have multiple sheets within the same, what we call workbook. So, you know, that way it's just saving as one file altogether. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sheet 2 here, and we're going to have some fun with this fill down feature. So just like Excel, Sheets has a fill down function built into it. So for instance, I'm going to type in January. So here's January. Now, this is another important thing to know, that a lot of these features, if your cursor is inside that box, so right now my cursor is blinking after the Y. If my cursor is inside that box, Google right now thinks that I'm typing. So if I try to do some of these different features, it's not going to work. So what I always tell people is to click off, just so like to cancel out of, you know, writing, and then click back on. And what you need to do at this point, you see how my mouse changes into that crosshair or plus sign? So once that crosshair or plus sign goes in the corner there, I can hold down my mouse and just drag it out, and when I let go, watch what happens. It automatically puts the months of the year just because I typed in January. So that's called our fill across or fill down series. So Sunday would be the same thing, and I can go ahead and click off, click back on, and I can go ahead and fill down just by the different days of the week. So that's really helpful, especially for teachers or people that maybe repeat different things over. You certainly don't have to retype that. Just type in one of them, and then it'll go ahead and repeat for you, and that's called your fill across or fill down feature. So I also want to make note that if I put in 20 and then I put in 21, and then I highlight both of these together and then look for my crosshair again, and I just go across, it's going to automatically fill that in too. So that may be helpful for you if you're, if you're adding up something or doing some different things, that it also does numbers. I want to mention too, along the same notes, if I just put 20, look what happens. So if I go all the way across, 20 is the only number that it repeats. So it's important to know that if you want just one number repeated or just one thing repeated, just put in one of them and then go ahead and fill across. As long as it's not like the days of the week or the months of the year, then it will go ahead and fill in that same number. Whereas this one, I put two numbers and then filled it across, and then it automatically counted for me. So that's really nice. I also want to note too that I can go ahead and make my own. Like, this has been really helpful for teacher reading groups. Like if I wanted to put different reading groups, so I have Jan, Mike, Sarah, and Kelly. If I highlight all of these names again, following those same things that I did with 20 and 21, if I go over here in the corner and fill across, what it's going to do is basically I've created my own series, Jan, Mike, Sarah, Kelly. Put February in there somehow. It recognized January. Mike, Kelly, or Sarah, Kelly, March, Mike. So it recognized January as being a month. But you get the idea of how I can create my own series and then have Google follow it based on what it is that I was doing. So really neat. That's just called your fill down, or you're creating your series. So another neat feature of Google Sheets. All right, so I'm going to hop back over to sheet 1, and the next thing that we're going to go ahead and talk about is sorting and filtering. So this is a really important part of Google Sheets, and I'll tell you, a lot more people that I work with now, a lot more teachers that I work with now are starting to use Google Sheets a whole lot more, because what's happening is they're using Google Forms to collect data, and when they collect that data automatically goes into a Google Sheet. So when that data automatically goes into a Google Sheet, then they're calling me and asking me, how do I sort this? How do I filter it? What can I do with all of this data? And so those are really good things to do with Google Sheets, because now you have a whole bunch of data, and now you're trying to figure out how you can read it better and how it's best suitable for you. So one of the features, of course, is to sort and filter. So let's take the first one first. So let's say I wanted to sort this. Now, in my list, I have first name, last name, email, address, city, and I have all these different things that go along with these names. My names, by default, are not in alphabetical order by last name. So I want to just show you a couple different things with this sorting part. If I click on column B, now notice how each one of these columns has a drop-down arrow next to it. So I'm going to click on column B. And so notice these options that I get. So I can sort sheet A to Z, sort sheet Z to A, convert, do all these different things. If I do that and I click on sort sheet, notice how, first of all, notice how it only highlighted the first two columns. So if I sort sheet Z or A to Z, it's going to sort everything because it even sorted the title too. And so it moved everything around. Even though these two columns were highlighted, it still moved everything around. So that's probably not the best way because it even sorted my title. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that, and I'm going to show you a different way. So if I wanted to highlight, and I'm just going to highlight all of these right here, I'll just highlight everything but not including my title, I'm going to go up to my data menu, and I can go to sort range. And notice how, again, I also have last name, first name, email address, all of those things highlighted too. So those are my headers, and I have them highlighted, but I don't want them sorted. So when I click on sort range, I have the option to click data has header row, which means that it's not going to sort that first row for me. It's going to recognize that those are headers, and it's not going to sort them. So I can sort by, let's say we'll sort by last name. So say A to Z, and then I can go click on sort, and then it automatically sorts them. Again, it keeps my header row up there, my title, but then it sorts everything alphabetically by last name, and it keeps everything together. And that's always a main concern with people doing spreadsheets is when they start sorting, they're concerned that they're going to sort just the names and not the addresses, and then things won't match anymore. So I always just like if that's a concern and you tried sorting it before and it was sorting your titles and so forth, just highlight what you want and then go up to that data sort range, and then that will be helpful. Just make sure you check that box that says that you have a header row. Now, another neat thing, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get rid of this title here because we're going to do some other changes. So I'm just going to click on, well, we'll just delete this whole row. So I'm just going to say delete row 1. So under my edit menu, and now we're back here. Okay, so I'm going to do one other thing, and that's called filtering. So I'm going to go to my city right here, and so here's my city column. And filtering is pretty neat because let's say that let's say I was a bus driver or something, I needed to get a memo home to all the kids that lived in Perrysburg. And I had a lot of them. Of course, my spreadsheet only has 4 of them, but maybe, realistically, I had a lot. So I want to get a memo out to these kids, and I need to quickly find all the kids that live in Perrysburg without me looking through each record. Now, I could sort it. That would be an easy way to do. I could sort it. But even easier than that, I can filter it. And so right up at the top, I do have a little drop down. I can look for my filter option. It's not going to be there, so I can go ahead and click on city again. Here's actually my filter icon over here if I click on filter, or also it's under that data menu, so I can click on filter there. Either way works. You can go ahead and click on it. Now notice how my spreadsheet changed a little bit. I get some extra colors. I get this little filter icon next to city, but it hasn't changed any data yet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on this city icon right here, or the filter icon right next to city, and I'm going to tell Google Sheets, hey, I only want to see the people that live in Perrysburg. So I'm going to make sure Perrysburg is checked and all the rest of them are not checked. And so when I click on OK, look at that. It filtered out anybody that did not live in Perrysburg or any blank cells too. It filtered all of those out. So it's only showing the people that live in Perrysburg. Now, another common question I get all the time is, oh no, okay, this is awesome, Christy, but what happened to the rest of my data? And so the answer to that question is I can just turn off my filter, or I can just go ahead and check these boxes again, whatever works for you, and then all of them will come back. But I can go ahead and turn off the filter just by clicking on that filter icon up there, and then the filter will be turned off. let's go ahead and move to the next thing. And this is one of my favorite things to do in Google Sheets, and this is called conditional formatting. And again, this is something that you can use in Excel too, but this is a really good thing to use, especially with fines or like money amounts, because if you're like me and you have a lot of data, and again, this spreadsheet doesn't have a lot of data, but if you had a spreadsheet that had a lot of data and you were trying to quickly see who had balances on their library fines or who had a Chromebook repair balance or account balance or whatever, conditional formatting is a really nice feature that works nicely for this. And so I'm going to show you how this works. So here's my account balance right here. So I'm going to highlight this whole column. And I'm going to use my drop-down arrow next to my menu, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on conditional formatting. So it's way down towards the bottom. And so it brings up this little menu off to the side, and it color codes these automatically, which I'm going to change anyway. So here's my conditional formatting. So right up at the top, it says single color, color scale. I can change the color if I want to. But what I want you to know, so here's the apply to range, which is just column J, which is what I've selected. And it says format cells if. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tell it, because I don't really care if their balance is 0. That means I don't have to call them. That means I don't have to send them a letter. But I do care if their balance is more than 0, because that means that they owe the school some money. So I actually want those cells, so this would be this cell and this cell, to stand out so that I can quickly visually see how many people that, you know, owe the school some money. So I'm going to say, okay, so I want this to be greater than. So I want conditional formatting to do something if the sum or if the number in the cell is greater than 0. Because again, I don't care if it's 0, but I really care if it's greater than 0. So you could tell it already started to change, but I'm going to actually change the color. So I don't really want this green color, rather I want to have a different color. So I'm going to say fill color. I actually want it to be red, because I want these to really, really stand out. So when I say done, this applies as a rule. Of course, I can add more than one rule if I want to, but you get the idea. So now what's happening, this conditional formatting says the account balance is $1, so it's red. The account balance is $50, so it's red. And here's 0, and here's 0, so there's nothing. Now, if I would continue to put numbers in here, let's say that it's 0 again, that's going to be nothing. Let's say it's 5. That's going to be red. So 2, it's going to be red. 1, going to be red. So you get the idea. And it's automatically, again, giving it that $sign because this column is formatted with that $sign formatting. So conditional formatting is really neat because very quickly it can provide a visual, a nice visual of, you know, what needs attention quickly. And you, of course, can do lots of different things. So if I went to add a new rule, this can be if the text ends with or if the text contains. So if you're looking for certain words or certain numbers, or maybe it doesn't contain something, or maybe date is before. So maybe this is, maybe the students are turning in something through Google Forms. And so if the assignment is late, it will timestamp and date each entry that they've put in for that Google form. So maybe if it's late, you can tag it as red or blue or purple or whatever color you want if the date is different than what you want. So there's lots of different ways that you can go ahead and use this conditional formatting. So really neat feature to Google Sheets, and also it's in Excel. If you've ever used it before, it works the same in Google Sheets. All right, so let's talk about some functions. So I'm going to go back to our Chromebook repair and our library fines and our account balance, and I'll go ahead and get rid of these here so that we can go ahead and have more space. So my library fines, my Chromebook repair, and my account balance, I want to figure out the sum of all of these columns. Because again, if I have a lot of library fines, you know, my librarian's going to be wanting some money, right? So she can, or the school rather, so they can kind of tidy up some loose ends before the end of the school year. Same thing with the Chromebook repair and so forth. So what I can do is Google Sheets has automatic functions that are already set in there. So if I go up to my toolbar, here's my little functions icon, and I can go ahead and drop down that menu right next to it and pick a function. Now, I'll tell you that there are a ton of functions. So I'll just click on more functions here for you real quick, and it'll go through all the functions list, and you can see all these functions, how many functions that there are. We're not going to talk about those today, but know that you can go ahead and go to more functions and find any kind of function that you might be looking for. For today, we're just going to talk about this sum. So I'm going to click on sum, and it's going to say, okay, I'm ready to do a sum. What do you want me to add? And so if you look up here, here's my formula bar right up here. And so it's basically saying equals sum, and then it has the parentheses. And so inside those parentheses are where my numbers or where my cells need to be. And so the only thing that I really need to do is I need to click on this first cell, and I think I lost it, so let me close or click off and then click back on again because I think I was clicking around too much. So I'm going to go ahead and click on sum one more time. So I'm just going to click on this first cell, hold down on it. I'm not going to let go yet. Hold down, drag, and then now I'm going to let go. And so if you look up here and down here, it's the same thing. Basically, it says equals sum, parentheses, H2, so this is H2, and then this is H5. And a lot of people don't know this, but you could just go in here and change it. So like H2, like maybe I don't want it to say H2, maybe I want it to say H3. So maybe I only want to add these three, or maybe I only want to add H4 to H5, and so forth. So I can go ahead and change all of those just by using that formula bar up at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to put it to H2 again, just so we can be consistent with all of our adding, but you get the idea of how you can go ahead and change it. Now here's where that fill across or fill down comes back into play, because I have this sum already prepared right here, and I also want the sum in Chromebook prepared, and I also want the sum in account balance. I don't have to put a sum in there again. I can just click on this, use my little fill across arrow, make sure my cursor becomes that little crosshair or little plus sign, hold down with my mouse and drag it over. And notice how automatically it put in those sums. And so to kind of make sure it's working properly, let's go ahead and change this 0 right here to 50. And we should see our 50 down there change to 100, and it did. So now we're making sure that those formulas are working, or those functions. So what's really nice, and I always tell people this at the beginning of the school year, if you know that you're going to be setting something like this up, because lots of times people think that the data has to be in here in order for these functions to work, and that's not true. So my recommendation would be is if you know that you're going to be setting something like this up, figure out how many cells or how many rows and columns you need, and then put your function way down here in the corner. And then as you start to add things, like if there was nothing here, so let me just delete all these where it says 0. As I start to add this, we'll say 5, we'll say 10, we'll say 100, we'll say 20, it's still going to work, even though there's nothing in there. So that's really nice that you can go ahead and set these things up ahead of time, and then it just works as you go. So really neat. So again, fill across, use those functions. You have lots of different functions. Of course, a really popular one with teachers is average. You can go ahead and find the average, like for any grades that you might want to, or the max or min, and then some different functions over there too. I do want to talk to you very briefly about this new function. I actually just watched a video on it the other day, and I think it's really cool. And I think it's becoming really popular because people, or students, are doing things with their username. If your username is like first initial last name, or maybe if your email address is first initial last name or something like that, and I certainly don't want to type every single student's name in their first initial last name, there's actually a function that does that automatically for you. And I already have it listed up here. It's actually equal sign. So anytime something starts with an equal sign, that's a function, which means it's going to do something, right? It's some kind of formula. And it says left A3. And so A3 is actually Kelly's first name. So cell A3 is Kelly's first name. So I'm going to go back here. And then it says comma 1. So that's like the first letter of that in that cell. And then again, back to this, this square over here. And it says parentheses and B3. So B3 is her last name. And so basically what this function is doing is it's saying, okay, we're going to put a function in equals left A3, so it's going to take the first letter of the first name and then the whole last name, and it's going to put it inside this Chromebook username column. So again, I did not type that in. And what's neat about this now is that I can fill down. And so each kid, J Shoes, J Smith, and I can go up too if I needed to. So here's up, R Bush. So if I just put it in one cell, I can go ahead and fill across or fill down however I wanted to put it in there. But I really wanted to point that out in this webinar because I think more people that are using student accounts and so forth, if your student accounts are first initial, last name, or of some variation, you can go ahead and put a formula in there to save you time from typing all of that in. So really neat. All right, so I'm keeping an eye on time. We have a couple last things to cover before we're at the end of this webinar, and the next thing is that Explore tool. So down at the bottom, you may have seen this before in some other applications if you use Google Docs or some of the other ones, but you have this Explore tool down at the bottom of your page. And so what I'm going to do, another trick of Google Sheets, is if I click on the box, the cell that's in between A and 1, in my case I was on C, but I can still be on A, so I'm going to click on this box right here and it highlights the whole entire sheet. So it's basically saying, okay, I want this whole entire sheet highlighted, and I'm going to click on this Explore tool. Now what this does is this automatically finds data for me. So it has the sum, the average, the min, the max. Maybe that doesn't make too much sense because I have addresses and so forth in there. But if I go down towards the bottom, it says Kelly has the highest value for library fines, and the second highest is $1. So it's going through all these different things. Here's my my chart of the different cities that people live in. And so again, all I did was click on Explore. It's giving me all this information. And so down here, Kelly has the highest Chromebook repair. Jim has 74.1%. And so it's going through, Jim has the highest value for Chromebook repairs, and then here's the account balance. What's really neat about this are these are just charts or graphs that I could actually hold down on this, drag it, and drop it, and now it appears on my page, on my Google Sheet. And so if I close out of Explore, here it is on my Google Sheet. I can go up to see my data of everything that's there, and then I also have this Google Sheet, or I'm sorry, this Google chart here. And so with that said, if I'm looking at this and I'm saying, oh wow, that's awesome, but I really wish that it was, something else. I wanted to include something else. This drop-down arrow right next to this chart, I can go ahead and click on that and click on Advanced Chart. And then now here's where I can go ahead and manipulate all that stuff. So I can change the font, background. Maybe I want this to be black. I can go ahead and change all of these different things. I'm going to make that white again because it's kind of hard to read. But you can change all of these things, how it's labeled. I can maybe just say city instead of count of city, and then I can change all that. I can even change the chart type. So if I want it to be a line chart, I can go ahead and change it to be lines or to be, anything I wanted up there. So when I say update, then it automatically updates it in my chart. Now, if you're looking at that and you're like, okay, that's really nice, but I don't really like to use that Explore tool and I'd really just like to create my own chart from scratch, you can certainly do that too. I'm going to click on Sheet 2. Actually, I'll stay on Sheet 1 here. If I go up here right next to my filter icon, here is my Insert Chart icon. I could also go under my Insert menu and say Chart, and that would do the same thing. The important thing to note, though, again, is to have the information selected first that, in which you want to see that information in your chart. Otherwise, Google Sheets won't know what kind of information you want in your chart. So if I would just click on that chart icon right here with my information selected, I can go ahead and find whatever type of chart that I want, and I can customize it, and I can do anything here, and then that will then appear inside my Google Sheet. Of course, I can also move it to another sheet if I wanted to, if I didn't like it. If it was too busy on one sheet, I can go ahead and put it in a separate one. That would be fine too. So really neat. Again, if you're pulling this information from Google Forms, you have it made because you can go ahead and get all that information from parents or other people filling out that Google form, and then once it's in your Google Sheet, you can manipulate this data anyhow, any way you want to by filtering it, sorting it, putting charts in, color coding it, all of that stuff. So really, really neat. All right, so the very last thing that we're going to go ahead and talk about before we wrap it up is printing. And this is a very common question that I get lots of times when people try to print their spreadsheets. And so if I go up to the top where it says File, I can go ahead. We already talked about Download As, but you also have this option to print. So I'm going to click on Print here, and by default it says I'm going to print the current sheet. I can print all sheets, or I can print just the selection. So that would be like whatever's highlighted on my page. I could do the paper size. Here's my layout, actual size, portrait, landscape. I can fit it to width. So if you want everything to fit on one page, regardless of how much is there, you can click on fit to width, or any of these other ones. Here are some really interesting features that I think everybody kind of just passes over, or they don't really know about them. This first one says repeat row headers on each page. That's pretty important, because if you have pages and pages and pages of first name, last name, email, first name, last name, email, if you don't have this checked, when people get to page 2, it's not going to have those headers that say first name, last name, email, first name, last name, email. So this is a really good thing to check, because then it's still holding those headers on each page, no matter how many pages you have printed. This next one says no grid lines. So grid lines, and I'll just cancel here, grid lines are these lines all right here. So some people like them to be printed, some people don't want them to be printed. So if you do or don't, here's where you can go ahead and decide. When I click on print, I can say no grid lines, or I want the grid lines. If there's a title of the document, I can go ahead and check that box. That will include it when I print. Same thing with sheet names, same thing with page numbers. So I can go ahead and check or uncheck any of those things depending on what I'd like on my printed copy of my spreadsheet. And then I can go ahead and click print, and it will fire up my printer. So really neat things that, hopefully will be helpful for you using Google Sheets. All right, so that was the very last thing. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my presentation here, and I'm going to kind of wrap things up with this last slide. So I'm going to go ahead and present this. I want to, of course, thank you for attending. If you'd like to get involved with our Google Educators group, and this was something that I talked to you about a little bit earlier, here is that link again for our Google Educators group. You can go ahead and jot that down, or you certainly can just do a Google search on GEG of Northwest Ohio, and it should be the first one that pops up. So that talks about a lot of different things that we're doing, including those road shows that, again, are totally free, that you can go ahead and attend. You'll also find a lot of information on our training.nowaka.org website. Our roadshow website is a link off that site as well, so we encourage you guys to go ahead and check that out if you'd like to attend one of our free events, or maybe even present at one of them. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, here's the link for that. Once again, these webinars are recorded, so I will go ahead and put this out on our training website. I usually just take a couple of days to go ahead and edit it, and then it will be out there along with this presentation. If you'd like to sign up for our Tuesday Tech Tips, there's the link for that. And then lastly, for your CEU information, if you've attended this webinar, how we do it is usually about 24 hours, we'll say about tomorrow morning, you'll receive an email from our NOWAKA system that thanks you for attending. And if you fill out an evaluation, the second part of the evaluation will ask for your name and your email address and so forth. We do have a script running on the back end that once you submit that, then it will generate your CEU certificate, and then it will go ahead and email that directly to you. So that will come into your inbox. So I want to thank you once again for attending, and please let me know if you have any questions, and we hope to see you at the next webinar.